let's go ahead and get started. So we are Women Who Code Chicago chapter. So I know some of you are out there on video, so it's great to see some friendly faces. And if you don't want to be on video, you want to keep yourself anonymous, no worries, just keep your video off. Just some basic Zoom etiquette. Let's make sure that we are muting ourselves when we're not speaking. And again, no pressure. You don't have to enable the video option, but want to give you the opportunity to, in the event you want to engage with us. So we are Women Who Code. Today for our meetup, we're going to go really quickly through Women Who Code and who we are. We're going to talk through a brief introduction of our speakers. We're going to dive into our crypto tech talk and have a panel where we will have the opportunity to hear a little bit more in depth of our crypto topic. And we're going to open it up for you all for a Q&A as well. And then lastly, we do have some gift cards to raffle. Capital One is our corporate sponsor for today, and they are going to raffle two $25 gift cards. So what we'll do is basically every participant that is here today is eligible to be entered into the raffle. So we will definitely take names and pause for that throughout our time today. So just really briefly on Women Who Code, what's our vision? Well, we envision a world where women are represented as technical executives, founder, venture capitalists, board members, and software engineers. Our mission really is to inspire women in their careers in technology. We obviously want them to excel, and that's why we're here. Women Who Code is based out of 20 countries, 70 cities. We're always expanding. There's new chapters popping up here and everywhere. But don't take my word for it. Feel free to check out our network page online, and you can see just the vast community that's out there worldwide. Quick, inclusive kind of disclaimer and public service announcement. So our code of conduct is an inclusive community. And so, of course, because we're dedicated to providing an empowering experience for women, but not just women, it's really anyone who participates. As you know, we have folks on the line that might not be might be non-binary and not gender identifying. So what we want to do is make sure that you understand that Women Who Code is an inclusive community who really engages and supports everyone, regardless of their gender, their identity, their expression, sexual orientation, ability, or physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, age, religion, any sort of socioeconomic status, caste, creed, political affiliation, or preferred programming languages even. So no biases there. But really our events here are intended to inspire women, again, as I said, to excel in their tech careers. And so really what we want to make sure that we're doing is having an inclusive environment where people here feel welcome. And we have a very strict policy where we do not tolerate harassment. And that is to any of our members, any of our participants in this meetup today. We don't tolerate harassment of any form. So if you want to dive deeper and hear a little bit more about the Women Who Code conduct, again, check us out at womenwhocode.com, code of conduct. Here's a sneak peek of our Women Who Code directors. So we have Ann Young, who is CTO for Northwestern Mutual in the wealth management space. I feel like, and this has changed a little bit, right? You have like a lot of different LOBs and groups under your accountability. We have Sungmi Naylor, who is a director at Capital One, and Andrea Chang, who is a VP of project delivery at Adage Technologies. And then there's myself, Blanca Roman. I also work for Capital One and get to spend some time in portfolio delivery in that space. So these are your local friendly Women Who Code directors. So any questions, you can holler at us. We're out there on the meetup, and you can feel free to contact us with maybe any events that you want to host in the future, any chats or any topics that you want to learn more about. We have our key speakers today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Andrea, who's going to go ahead and give the warm welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Blanca. So I am going to introduce our fabulous speakers today separately. And so Lesley Lynn is going to be doing our first presentation. And after that, we'll be joined by Sara for a panel discussion. So before I introduce Lesley, I did want to do a brief disclosure because of the topic that we are discussing and the companies that both of our speakers are representing. I did want to read this disclosure that the information presented today is intended for educational purposes only and does not constitute nor is intended as investment advice and is not intended as an endorsement of investment or security. Please remember that all investments carry some level of risk, including the potential loss of principal invested. Prices at which digital assets, including cryptocurrencies, are purchased and sold are highly volatile, and trading digital assets involves a high degree of risk, including the risk of loss of principal. The past performance of any particular digital asset is not indicative of future results. You should carefully consider these risks and others associated with cryptocurrency. And with that, Lesley Lynn started to explore cryptocurrencies in 2014, where she led a team of college students to tackle PwC's case study around taxations on virtual currency and its microfinance environment. Lesley has since been a believer in the adoption of digital currency. Post-COVID era, Lesley decided to explore personal interests as a career and joined Taxbit, a unicorn valued company that aims to automate information reporting and accounting experience to speed up the adoption of digital assets. As a senior technical consultant at Taxbit, she builds and scales product implementations by leveraging her experience in management and tech consulting and her background in high tech, finance, and cryptocurrency. And with that, Lesley, take it away, and Blanca will present your slides for you.
Thank you so much. Hey, I just wanted to make sure that you are all able to hear me.
All good.
Perfect. I'm going through some video issues, and that's why I have my camera off, but I should be turning on and see you'll be able to see my face very soon. But so yeah, quickly wanted to run through the agenda of the day. I know the audience here is probably new to the world of crypto or the world of blockchain. So I wanted to be able to give a quick overview of blockchain, how that actually works, how do we validate the transaction, what that means for cryptocurrency and specifically Bitcoin, and then cover some of the ongoing developments that's happening in this space. And maybe possibly, during the panel, share some of my experience and my observation from, this industry from day-to-day experience. So yeah, that's the agenda. Why don't we go to the next slide? Perfect. So I think in order to understand the value of crypto, we need to go back to blockchain. That's why I started there. You probably all heard of this term before, but to distinguish the difference between blockchain and the traditional database. So as you all might know, the traditional database is centralized. So you typically have a centralized server that processes transactions, and client, as in you, me, or some of the client servers from different institutions will be able to access that centralized data server. Now, some of the issues that's originated from that centralized model is that you could have potential data loss, data integrity issues if you run into any changes in the server or get hacked or get damaged. So that lead to the invention of blockchain, which is, if we go to the next slide, and we want to turn that into a decentralized model. And I'm not going into the very technical details of the blockchain, but think of it as different blocks of data, database that's being linked to each other using technology of hashing and a bunch of others, so that you'll be able to track from one block to another. As you can see on the left side of the screen, there's the Genesis block, the very first database, for example, and then the different chain of the blocks get chained together, and therefore it prevents the data loss, secure data, preserve data integrity, and so on and so forth. And So going from there, take it even further, then we can chain different servers together as well. And they are all preserved via cryptography, inheriting the previous block's hash, meaning that the data, some of the benefits I can call out, maybe also in the next slide. We'll be able to, so this model of data governance, the transaction are not governed by a single party, right? So it's not centralized. Each blocks are connected to each other. It creates a model of trust. And most importantly, that which means that all the transactional history that were recorded on the block were considered considered to exist in a decentralized distributed ledger. So for those of you who are familiar with any of the accounting terms or finance terms, ledger, general ledger, subledger, etc., are very important accounting concept in which that each transaction is documented, whether you have debit or credit, to make sure that we have a balanced accounting balance sheet. So typically you can record that in different methods, but how it works on blockchain, meaning that it's decentralized. That goes into a very interesting concept of where Bitcoin really started to surface starting from 2008 post financial crisis, is that to incentivize the accuracy of the data or the transaction that are being recorded on the ledger, miners. So miners are the people who owns computers, servers, or GPUs that have really expensive machines that can, do math calculations on the validity of those transactions. So miners then came into the picture to run those GPU or CPU machines so they can validate the transaction, meaning that miners need to be incentivized to do this validation and then record those validated transaction onto the blockchain so that each transaction then is unique and it's accurate and it cannot be reversed. So next slide. Then, so you heard a lot about Bitcoin, right? So this is how Bitcoin, for example, validates a transaction before it gets written on a block. So multiple, I got some pictures from the internet. So as you can see on the right side, those are all miners, meaning, for example, I have, for example, 10 computers, or Andrea has 10,000 computers, and we are all like individual miners. And we all go in and looks to verify a transaction that's on either Ethereum or Bitcoin. And we, as miners, then trying to get to validating this at the fastest and most accurate rate. So because Andrea has more computer power than I do, so she eventually, became the first to validate the block and gets that record written on the blockchain and signed, sealed, cannot be reversed. So that's how a transaction is validated. And in return, then Andrea gets rewarded by a certain amount. And historically, then she'll be rewarded by 1 Bitcoin or 1 Ethereum, depending on which blockchain she's on. So next slide. Yeah, so this is just the same concept. I think I covered it. Eventually, this just becomes the leader. So let's go to the next one. So how did Bitcoin really started? So there is a financial concept or problem on the digital transaction in the past, right? So if you think about it, we're trying to make transactions online, but some people can fake it. Some people can hack it. Some people can say, I made the transaction, let's say, I'm just going to name names. Let's say Selena is trying to sell something to Christine. And then Sami came in and say, I also wanted to offer you the same price. But then someone, there could lead to a problem, which is double spending. So because it's digital, right, double spending, some people can forge the ledger and say, I actually paid you the money, you should give me the goods. But instead, they forged the ledger, and then Sami got the goods, and Selena said she paid, Christine actually paid, but we don't know who actually paid. So that has been a big problem on the in the past for a lot of digital ledger and digital transactions. So Bitcoin again came into the place around 2008, invented by this anonymous mysterious person called Satoshi Nakamoto, allegedly a Japanese name, but we actually don't know who he or she is. So they published this white paper on bitcoin.org, documenting the theory, which is very legit at the time, still very valid, about the theory behind Bitcoin, which is trying to prevent the double spending problem. So earlier I talked about how a miner would help to validate the transaction, right? So miner needs to be incentivized to spend those money or electricity powers in order to validate the transaction. So that's where Bitcoin came into the place, that miners getting rewarded by Bitcoin. And as you can see recently, Bitcoin's value keeps shooting up, meaning that miners or whoever that's trading it are getting rewarded in the form of Bitcoin, but people consider the value of Bitcoin keeps going up. People consider it more valuable assets to hold, and therefore you're seeing, each Bitcoin is now worth $50,000 or $60,000. It sounds pretty ridiculous too. So yeah, that's their historic origin and the reason behind why Bitcoin initially existed. We still don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto actually is, but one thing about Bitcoin is that it's very divisible. It can divide it into very small unit, so that one person doesn't have to own one Bitcoin; they can own a very small fraction of a Bitcoin. So, yep, next slide. I do want to highlight the importance why we want to talk about it. I know that it sounded crazy that the market cap has reached a very high level, especially very recently. But if you think about it, fiat money or digital currency or any sort of money only has value because people considered it so. I'm going to pause here for a second. All the money has value because people all agree that is the medium of exchange. So same goes for gold and US dollars or any paper monies. Now there's some government governing behind it, trying to make sure that fiat money is secure. Now, it's the same thing, in my opinion, right, for digital exchange, digital currencies as well. First of all, it's validating transaction, it brings value, but second of all, people agree that there is value and we can trade on it as well. Now, the next question is, how can we make sure the enterprise, government, or individuals all accept it? How can we turn that even further into real world use? So yeah, this is left side of the chart is a screenshot that we took. As you can see, Bitcoin's market value is now over $1 trillion, and it's number 8. To be honest, this chart might have, it's probably no longer even number 8 with how much money is going into the market right now. So the time that it took for Bitcoin to reach a $1 trillion market cap is only 12 years. And you look at all the other mega large companies that are in the world, how long it took to reach their market cap. It's just very interesting from my point of view to just observe this industry growing and how it's changing. Yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive, that's for sure. Next slide. Okay, so I talked about how we can adopt crypto, right? let's say if there is value and people agree to it, then there are so many development that's happening in the space. The next question is, how can we make sure that it can be used in the real world? So here are some of the companies that's either looking into accepting crypto, or they've had different forms of talks with other organizations about, to be able to either accept crypto, transact in crypto, hold crypto, etc. So these are just some screenshots. Some of the large digital exchanges, including large banks, are now also considering holding crypto assets or trading crypto assets. So there have been a lot of talks in Congress, White House, and with the recent infrastructure bill passing, many talks that are happening right now. So maybe one day we'll be seeing, Bitcoin or any other sorts of crypto assets as a common payment for exchange. So fun fact, I think Burger King in Venezuela is the screenshots at the bottom. So Venezuela's president actually made appearance to the Miami Bitcoin conference about 5 months ago, and apparently he's a believer. I don't comment on political whether or not that's the right choice, but sorry, not Venezuela, it's El Salvador president is what I was trying to say. So El Salvador's president made appearance in Miami conference, and now El Salvador is accepting Bitcoin as their legal tender. So we're seeing more and more changes that's happening in this space along with the financial industry. Next slide. Yeah, so here are just more examples we're seeing that's happening in the industry that I do want to mention or highlight. Visa is, they were at the Money 2020 conference as well that I just came back from. And a lot of major banks are working together with payment processing firms and trying to, understand and push the development within the crypto space. So for example, Venmo now allows you to send or allows you to buy crypto via their platform. Visa previously invested a ridiculous amount of, let me say, $250,000 to buy an NFT, simple pixelated image. But they actually made a huge upside investment gain on that NFT that they purchased. So yeah, many changes happening in the space. Next slide. I think I mentioned about all of those earlier as well. So there are many disruptive development that are happening in the space. So I mentioned Bitcoin, but there are many others: Ethereum, Binance Coin, stable coin, etc. And people are going from how can we disrupt these centralized institutions or centralized banks, centralized financial services, and turn that into either decentralized or semi-governed by a centralized network. And the amount of development that's happening in the space is just mind-blowing. So here is just a comparison of the chart. Next slide. Okay, so then many of you might ask and wonder, how can I purchase a coin, or how can I hold any digital assets of my own? So there are a few ways to access it. Software wallets, you probably heard of Coinbase. Some of you might have heard of Gemini. Coinbase just recently went IPO, and it's basically a digital exchange, but also embedded wallet that allows you to trade and hold digital assets. There's another form, which is a hardware wallet, meaning that you purchase the coin and then you actually store it in a USB drive, and it's up to you to secure that USB drive. So say if someone hacked in, or you accidentally lose your hardware wallets, unfortunately that money is gone. So there are potential security issues as well, but there are different parties that are trying to address that concerns. So, yep, and then I would highlight that for at least as of today, if you hold any crypto assets and that's on your own, it's up to you to secure your digital wallet or your hardware wallet. So it's different from, let's say, if you get, you lose your credit card and someone accidentally spent $10,000 on it, and you can still go back to your bank and say, hey, this is actually my money, right? And the bank would compensate for that. Now that's different in the crypto world. And that's whether or not it's a downside, but it's what is it as of now. But there are different institutions such as Coinbase or other digital exchanges that provide you a login or a platform, and then you actually store your digital assets via them, and they keep your asset, portion of your asset in the hardware or code storage somewhere else. So yeah, that's accessibility. Let's go to the next slide. I think this is the same, so let's for the time being, let's skip that. Yeah. All right, this slide, I do want to highlight some of the ongoing developments in this space. So earlier I mentioned Coinbase, Gemini, there are other players like BlockFi or eToro. Those are all exchanges that are KYC compliant, meaning they comply to the law of know your customer. When you are trying to sign up for the services, the digital exchange would require your name, your social security number, so that they can tie your real identity to their backend digital wallet or to the trades that you've been making. But there is also at the bottom of the list, sorry to not going in sequence, there's decentralized exchanges that are performing decentralized finance or facilitating that, meaning that you only need your wallet. They do not require you, or they do not require your identity. So anyone can go on the internet and make lending, swapping, insurance, or all sorts of activities. And those activities are unique and not forgeable. However, your identity is not known. In the middle section, there's a key area of development that's happening recently, or not recently, but it's really blowing up recently. It's called NFT, stands for non-fungible token. And space where I've seen that's mostly used currently is digital arts or music copyrights. So let's say in the past, a digital artist or an artist would create an art and they can easily be either stolen for they can become fungible, or people go in and violate the copyrights. So how cryptocurrency help in this space is that it helps recognize the unique ownership of that art piece that the artist published. And therefore it's considered unique, it's not fungible, and it creates certain value. Now, whether or not that NFT is worth that price, it's not up for me to comment, but it's up for the buyers and the sellers who think that they're actually worth it. So that's why you're seeing some ridiculous money going into certain NFT art pieces that, at least both parties appreciate. So these are the top three that I see that's happening in this space, but there are a lot of different development that's happening. So this is more just crypto 101. Yeah, so here it is. Hopefully that gives you a good high-level overview. Yeah, we're right about time. So
awesome. Thank you, Lesley. And I'm going to introduce our next panelist, Sara Samuels. Sara Samuels is a former practicing attorney and runs her own fee-based financial planning firm since July 2008. And she works with clients all over the country and in the world. Sara specializes in working with emerging affluent clientele, especially those in the creative arts, tech, and sales, as well as closely held businesses and business owners by helping them feel inspired and to implement proactive and tax intelligent solutions. Sara's mission is to financially empower her clients so they reduce economic vulnerability and build enough wealth to live their best lives so they have clarity, confidence, and optimism about what is possible. Sara is representing us today from Northwestern Mutual, and we are going to jump right into the panel with Sara and Lesley. So first, I kind of want to, level set. Lesley did a wonderful 101 presentation, but let's kind of get some lingo defined. Lesley just talked about DeFi, centralized finance, NFTs. Can we further explain this for the group? And I'll turn this over to Sara.
Yeah, so I think, what's really important is I joke. So I used to be a practicing attorney before I was in financial planning. And I always joke that when I was an attorney, I made simple things really complicated and convoluted to get paid. And now I get to do the opposite, all of the noise and the acronyms and everything, try to make them meaningful, digestible, and applicable to what we do in our regular lives, right? So just kind of from a definition, let me just start even just with Bitcoin. We talk, crypto and tokens. And so if you really think of it, it's just really like an exchange, right? And it's just more that it exists in the digital world. And now Facebook coming out with its name being Meta, I feel like this is very meta sometimes as well, to really ensure the security of transactions. So it's virtual, right? And I love that when Lesley talked about, it's all about assignment of value, except that in this day, when we talk about fungible versus non-fungible in the sense of Bitcoin, every Bitcoin is worth the same. Okay, it's all equal value, and then it's just parcel values of that. And they're trying in terms of tokens or digital money to be able to exchange for online goods and services. That's one of the biggest issues right now, is how do we actually make this usable? And then those transactions mean they're not backed, monitored, or controlled by any central bank or authority. And at this point, that's why they're still not considered a traditional asset, because their fundamental value is not measured against the dollar. And so therefore, it doesn't quite right now have anything to really, quote unquote, back it. But honestly, Bitcoin is considered to be the original crypto and currently still first ranks in market cap, user base, and popularity. So just kind of laying a foundation from that side of things. And then as far as, we're talking about DeFi, so think of it as decentralized finance, right? It's an umbrella term for financial services on public blockchains. So mention Coinbase or Gemini, there's actually quite a few. And just with, crypto generally, it's global, it's peer-to-peer, just two people, right? And it's not routed through any, again, centralized system. So it's open to all. And one of the, pros or things that people are really looking at is that it takes on the basic premise of digital money and expands on it, really attempting to create a digital alternative to Wall Street. And users typically engage with decentralized finance via software called dApps, or decentralized apps, most of which currently run on blockchain. And unlike a conventional bank, there's no application, no account to open. You're really working peer-to-peer. Last is just to use this again regarding NFTs. So we talked about fungible versus non-fungible, and they're a crypto asset, so same thing, asset, in which each token is unique, as opposed to, like we just talked about, fungible Bitcoin, dollars, where they're all worth the same amount. Because each one's unique, it's almost like thinking about it as like an authenticator, right? We're able to say, hey, I own this digital asset, like artwork, recordings, those types of things, excuse me. And even virtual real estate is actually an NFT. And, those are most often stored in the digital marketplace. And like we talked about, every Bitcoin is worth as much as every other. Well, NFTs have that fungibility. So in that case, concert tickets are non-fungible, right? But an example of a, fungible token would be, hey, guess what? There's this LeBron, we're going to say it's worth, this 30-second spot is worth $500,000. If someone wants to pay for it, they can. So just an opportunity for people to kind of recognize, and NFTs are really fascinating because
they really raise philosophical questions about the nature of ownership itself. So you can almost think of them as being like certificates of authenticity for digital artifacts. And they're really, like we said, currently really being used in the space of NBA virtual trading cards, music and video clips, video arts. If you ever heard of People, he sold for millions and millions of dollars. And so from that side of things, it's still very wild, wild west, more so than even I would say digital currency, Andrea, at this point.
Well, thank you, Sara. Lesley, you had mentioned that you just returned literally from the Money 2020 conference. So fill us all in. Those of us who weren't able to attend, what's new and hot in the crypto space?
Yeah, first of all, I consider myself really lucky to be able to attend the conference. And for those who don't know, it's I believe the largest fintech conference in the world, and this year it's hosted in Vegas. So most of the participants in the past were from financial services industry, and 1/3 of them are mostly executives. However, this year, what blows my mind is that my company included, were probably the 1/3 of the participants that were coming from crypto space. Most of us being startups are being represented at the conference. And it's just so interesting to see, and having those conversations, traditional FinServ companies or traditional banks that are fully centralized, that are backed by the government and obviously have exclusive rights, and then have thousands of people working for a product, etc. And then you have, younger generation, or mostly younger, that using code or the financial concepts and trying to, I wouldn't even say disrupt, it's just they're coming up with new ideas of how financial services could look like. And for me, for example, Taxbit is where I work at. I just recently made my career switch to join Taxbit. Is a startup in Series B. However, we're trying to transform it into a corporate presence, right? Serving enterprise clients, government, and individual consumers. And I call it, we're selling the shuffle during the gold rush. Hopefully making money, but right. So we're helping to automate like taxation and accounting reporting around digital assets, cryptocurrencies, which is, Taxbit is not here building or creating a coin, but there is a huge pain point in the space, right? I talk about KYC, know your customers, and then IRS actually treats anyone who hold the crypto assets as someone who treats someone who holds property. And therefore, any gain is considered a capital gain. Any loss is considered a capital loss. So you have to file your tax at the end of year is 8949 as an individual consumer level. Then the question then becomes, how does digital exchanges give their consumers 1099B, which is the form that captures gain and losses so that consumers can file their taxes. So all sorts of exciting and also pain points that are, going on in the space. And Money 2020, I just found it fascinating to see the number of presence of crypto startups that are there talking to, the executives of the banks. Yeah, so I sense bigger changes coming from my experience.
So are any of the casino games taking crypto yet?
As far as I'm aware, I don't know where or which state or legislation would be legal or not. So I'm just speaking from my minimum Googling. There are, online digital casinos, right? Because if you have wallets, then you can do gambling online. But again, I feel like this can't happen anytime soon, because there are a lot of payment companies that were present at Money 2020 as well, whether it's startup or large size companies. And they might be facilitating this change going forward. Maybe one day soon.
That would be fun. So Sara, in your financial planning business, you're working primarily with this this clientele base of the emerging affluent in technology as well. So I'm interested to learn where crypto falls in the overall planning process for your clientele.
No, I think that's a great question. And, you know, I also would say, you know, I work with a lot of people who have lived in foreign countries, and, you know, we've talked a lot about inflationary issues. And so I think there's two ways to think about, you know, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, where I hear a lot of conversation, especially on more of a global sense of being able to theoretically stabilize potentially currency in some ways as well, because of the fact that it's peer-to-peer versus government-led. And so we're hearing a lot around that as well of, you know, or these could potentially be stabilizers, right? Versus, because I mean, I have clients in Brazil, and for anyone who knows the history of Brazil, you know, at one point their dollar was basically worth, you know, 0.000 nothing, right? So I do think that there's opportunity when we think long-term, short-term, and, you know, we certainly could also use, you know, Warren Buffett's old adage of, you know, in the stock market, you know, wins are made from the impatient, or sorry, from the impatient to the patient. And I think that's also something we need to be considering around crypto as well, is that I do, when I talk to my clients, there is some long-term opportunity. And even though it's what we call a volatile asset, so meaning there's lots of ups and downs, right? It can go from 40 grand. I mean, no one had even heard of crypto really even, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And, you know, there can still help build wealth, especially if we're thinking long term. Now, you know, realistically, there's nothing that will, you know, replace, and we still need to have emergency fund and be able to be thinking about, and it's second, in my opinion, to having a solid financial plan, right? Making sure your foundation is set. And then where crypto fits into that is it can make sense for a key part of their long-term portfolio, or for those they're short. However, due to the volatile nature, typically we recommend it for people who are more tech savvy, who are dedicated to learning about it, have time to ride the ups and downs. And then some of the same rules of investing in the stock market apply, namely, don't be emotional, you know, don't sell on a downswing. But it's gonna be even more difficult, I think, for most people. Because I always say, you know, you don't wanna, if the destination is Hawaii, we don't want to jump out of the Pacific Ocean if there's just a few bumps, but it's going to feel like that, because it is so often, you know, try maybe not check the price too often, and certainly not every day. You're going to get a stomach ache, and you're probably going to not really enjoy it either. And what we're really thinking about too, longer term, excuse me, is that, you know, is there opportunity for us to play it out where we own it, where we have these pieces? And so just some things, right, we have to think about. We can't gauge the drivers of performance at this point, because there is no true foundational piece. For every speculative investment that succeeds, more fail. And so at this point, at least from an institutional perspective, because one of the questions Andrea had is how are institutional thinking about it. Most larger institutions, say like a Northwestern Mutual, you know, right now it doesn't align with their investment philosophies, typically because they just don't feel like they can necessarily gauge how to recommend them. For the individual investors, I actually think that's a potential opportunity for you to say, well, I'm going to use this for me as maybe a speculative piece of my pie after I've built the foundation. So if you think about a financial home, you know, you have your foundation, first floor, second floor. This might be something where you think of it like in the attic, right? I've already built all the first floor, second floor, and now I have, or taking a little teeny piece. I love the idea of that wallet. You know, I actually, you know, think that taking some time, there's some great YouTube videos on what is crypto. There was a really awesome Business Wars podcast that recently was a 4-part series on the evolution of cryptocurrency that I would highly recommend people thinking about, and talk with someone you trust to make sure that you have all your foundations set so that you do have the availability to start thinking about it more speculatively.
Good advice. Thank you, Sara. So here's another thing as we're wrapping up 2021, which is hard to believe, but it is almost November right now, and kind of looking back at everything that's happened, and particularly this week being very exciting in the crypto market with the first Bitcoin future on the New York Stock Exchange. How is 2021 different than previous years for crypto adoption? And I'll throw that out to Sara or Lesley to address.
Lesley, do you want to? I can talk to you. You can go ahead.
I personally don't have any opinion whether or not on the crypto ETF, but I'm glad to see that this is being, accepted to a level where the institutions are creating a Bitcoin ETF. So it's a big signal for me. Yeah, so I think going forward, we're going to see more of that 2022.
And just to kind of, talk a little bit about that. So we don't quite have the full ETF. So definitely was a milestone. So I think what we're seeing is there is great demand, and institutions are recognizing that what was just a throwaway kind of conversation about this cryptocurrency and so forth is now something that needs to be actually looked at. People are craving, investing in that, thinking about decentralized, finance, if you will. And it was a milestone because it was the first futures. So ETF just stands for exchange traded fund, but it was the first futures. So what's a little unique about that is they invest in Bitcoin future contracts, or basically agreements to buy or sell the asset later for an agreed upon price. It's very meta, right? Going back to that, rather than Bitcoin directly. And so they allow trading through investment accounts because we're not actually trading Bitcoin itself. It's about the potential future ability for those to actually have dollars. So it bypasses the hassle and security concerns of true actual cryptocurrency exchanges. And to Leslie's points, I think we actually are going to see a true ETF that will directly invest in Bitcoin. But right now, the only thing that we're really seeing is them saying, oh, the future's on it. So it's not quite where they eventually really wants to go. The industry is looking for us to have ETFs, which is, again, exchange traded funds. But it was very exciting, and it gets us into the right direction for we're now actually normalizing margin a little bit better.
I always find futures to be very meta indeed, which seems to be the word of the day today. A lot of meta memes.
Metaverse.
Definitely. Are there any questions from our audience here? I want to make sure that we get everyone's questions. Feel free to pop it in the chat. I see some conversation going around here on some good podcasts, YouTube videos, which is great.
Yeah, if I may add, I think to really get in or getting to know the space is, pick one channel or another and just spend 50 to $100, get your hands dirty. YouTube is a great way to get started for sure. See someone pinged.
I just posted a question to Lesley.
Oh, can you please share what is key factors for crypto values growing so quickly? So this is from my observation. I think, first of all, it does create certain values, in my opinion, by validating ledgers and making sure the accuracy. And it builds a foundation for all the other innovations to happen on top of that. So Bitcoin by itself is actually, compared to all the changes that are happening, is rudimentary. It's on a basic language, programming language. It does certain set of things only. Now, but on top of that, there are so many changes happening in Ethereum, right? So I think whether it's from individual consumer or investor side, or it's institutional investor or company, they're seeing an upside of the changes that are happening in the space. So there's large amount of money going in. Now, at the same time, last year, and this is my personal, just my thought, the government printed a lot of money. Inflation became a huge word, right? And then people look into crypto and be like, there's especially Bitcoin, limited set of number of the coin that can be mined, that can be distributed. And there's also actually a concept that I didn't mention, it's called halving, meaning that the more miners going into validating this, the harder it gets to validate right or quicker or faster. So there is a mathematical calculation goes into it to make sure the validity of distribution of the Bitcoin. So I think as it becomes more scarce, so scarcity is a key word for Bitcoin as well, people consider it more valuable.
Yeah, I was sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Lesley.
Yeah,
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, it is pure monetary policy of supply and demand inflation. And just to add to that, inflationary, 30% of all money in circulation in the US was actually printed in the last 18 months. And which is, just something unique to know in any way. And, the factors that we've seen, I think that there's also one intangible. It's being talked about, right? And there's funny things about Dogecoin, and we have heard, conversations about who's backing it, and Elon Musk, and, totally, I think meme culture is a great example, right, of that. And so part of that is just because, it's the theme of the day, but it, for those who are in the know, it's been obviously around a lot longer, but I think it's just becoming something that people are hearing about, understanding, or at least are really interested in as another means to not just build wealth, but have fun, speculate. Is why Robinhood became really popular this year, and things go viral so darn quickly that it's easy to get caught up in it. But I love what Lesley was saying, and I think this is about finance in general. Like, there is something about dipping your toes in the water and experimenting, having a little knowledge base. And I would encourage people to do that and spend some time. And, hey, paralysis by analysis is one thing. And if you spend a little time and actually want to get involved, there's some unique places, and Coinbase is great, and Gemini. They also have great explainer videos, and, have a little fun with it, as long as I said, it's not your entire financial plan.
Very sage advice. Well, we are coming up on time. We have a few other announcements, and of course we have our raffle, but I wanted to thank both of our speakers, Sara and Lesley. Thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you have shared with us today. This was wonderful, and I wish we had another hour, but let's go to our raffle, and Blanca will announce our winners and also our next Women Who Code event.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks again for our speakers today. It was so insightful to learn a little bit more about crypto. Our winner today, we have two. Remember, we have raffled off two $25 gift cards from our corporate sponsor, Capital One. And our first raffle winner is Demian Reyes. Demian, if you can chat me your personal email address, congratulations. I can make that gift card. I can have it make its way to you. Sorry, I got the jumbled there.
Thank you, Blanca. Thank you.
And now looking into our next raffle, we have Selena Han. Selena, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Like I said, don't forget to go ahead and message me directly onto the chat so that I can get your email address and get your gift card over to you.
Thank you.
The next announcement that we have, hopefully if you enjoyed this particular topic, you will join us next month as we dive into trilateral APIs. So really it's reimagining your microservices with trilateral APIs. We know that as more and more organizations are moving to the cloud, they need to start thinking about how they're going to architect and not thinking about building as they would in a traditional data center. So we have Prabha Raman from Capital One who will be giving a talk on trilateral APIs. If this is a topic that interests you, feel free to follow us on our meetup page and RSVP there. And hopefully we won't have any sort of technical difficulties, but fingers crossed, all will be well. And we will catch you on Thursday, November 4th at 5 p.m. Central.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you to our speakers and our Women Who Code directors. And we will hopefully see you next week.
Thanks for having me.
you so
Have a great
much.
day.
All right.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.